Hey guys, in this video I'll show you a couple of techniques that I use to add interest to my architectural drawings in order to create an enticing atmosphere. Sometimes using line drawings to represent modern architecture can feel a bit flat and dry, which in turn can make the design proposal feel a bit cold and uninviting. So in this video I'll be sharing a couple of techniques that you can use for your own line drawings in order to bring them to life. Okay, so let's dive into this. First off, I started with creating this base layer in SketchUp, and then over top of that I've traced the initial pass, which is this. And the way I started developing this sketch is I first of all started adding a bunch of details to it. So in the SketchUp model I already added the chairs, the oven, the cooker, the sink, things like a lamp and a bookshelf above. On top of that I then created another layer, and over here you can see that I've added things like floorboards, the texture to the underside of the counter, and then I also added a little bit of texture to these cupboard units over here, which is fridge, and also some of the storage space for the kitchen. I then proceeded to add a little bit of texture to the walls for the concrete, and lastly the glass balustrade. Now at this point as well I felt that it's important to add a little bit more details to the drawing, so I created this layer over here that then picks up on a little bit more objects. So we have things like a wine glass, wine bottle, a fruit bowl as well, knives, kind of things that you would expect to see in a house that somebody's living in. The problem sometimes with these pristine buildings that are modern is that they're a bit too alien because it seems like nobody's living there. So you kind of want to add detail as much as possible to these. At the same time, adding too much detail may mean that this drawing can become a bit cluttered and feel a little bit messy. So it's really about the balancing how much detail you show. I did choose to add coat hooks over here because I felt that that's the only place that the use of which is not very clear compared to the living room above and the kitchen below. So the next step after this is to introduce color. Color is really important because it can help in articulating the space and add a little bit of depth to the composition. I typically try not to overdo the colors, and I stick to about 3 to 4 plus the accent colors. So I use the gray for the couch upstairs, some of these kitchen units. I use the black for the storage units and the fridge, and then I use the brownie color for the wood and the white color for the plasterboard above. So that was the base palette, and then a couple of accents with that for the books and these plant pots. And I also used a little bit of color to introduce the texture to the floorboards, so a little speckles, and the same for the concrete walls over here in gray. And after that I proceeded to use shadows. Now the rule with shadows is that you kind of want to guess where the shadow is coming from, and the easiest way to do that is to look at the windows and then place the shadows. If I increase the intensity of one of these layers, you can see the kind of work I've done. So it really is an artistic license of how dark you choose to blend these shadows with the drawing. I mean, I usually go for a less opacity because it makes the drawing brighter, but sometimes you might want to have a bit of a moody feeling to it, in which case you might want to increase the opacity. You might also notice here that I use the marker overlays, and again this is just to give me another chance to introduce some variety and texture to the drawing, because otherwise it would look flat if I was just to fill in these with a bucket tool, for example. Now at this point the drawing looks quite developed. It has a lot of details, colors, and even shadows are sorted, but for this particular piece I wanted to have a little bit more depth, and so I proceeded to adding a kind of blurry pastel-like soft gradient, and I used that using my gradient brush that you can download in the description below. So what it allows me to do is essentially to add the highlights and the shadows, such as the contact shadows in the corner of the room, a kind of vignette around it. It's kind of darker around the corners of the composition, it gets lighter towards the windows, and it's kind of an interesting way to make the drawing pop a little bit and introduce that kind of variety and the blur and the gradient transition that otherwise is difficult to achieve with markers alone. And at this point I felt that I could stop it because the composition is developed well enough in order to convey the design intent. So there you have it. These are some of my favorite techniques in order to bring life to the drawings. Let me know in the comments below which one of these techniques you enjoyed the most. I also gonna link up 2 other videos over here and over here that go through a real-time process of how to create these sort of drawings, but they're using more of a kind of step-by-step tutorial approach to break down the process. So if you want to learn specifically how to create these drawings in step-by-step fashion, then I suggest you check those videos out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.